Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Ambassador David Satterfield, who's a former Special Envoy for the Middle East humanitarian issues under President Joe Biden between the years 2023-2024, and also a former US Ambassador to Turkey. He joins us from Houston. Ambassador Satterfield, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Really appreciate it. I mean, what does this deal look like to you, this 20-point peace plan? Does it look to you like a step closer to ending the war in Gaza?
Well, the points contained in this plan, the outline, because there are many details that need to be filled in, but the outline is consistent with discussions that have been had with states in the region, particularly the Gulf, with Israel, with others, since the end of 2023, shortly after the October 7th massacre. All of that is appropriate. There is critical reference, and it is critical, to a transition which brings in a reformed Palestinian Authority, underscore reformed. There is critical reference to the need for Arab participation in all of this, without which there is no day after. And there's also reference, difficult as it is for the government of Israel and for many of the Israeli people to accept, there's a reference here to the national aspirations of the Palestinians for a state. All of that is important, but the question now is, what is the response of Hamas? Hamas, I believe, I assess, believes it's winning, believes that if more Palestinians die, if Israeli hostages die in the process of a ground campaign, it will increase international pressure, domestic Israeli pressure on the government to bring an end to all of this. I hope I am wrong. But I think that a Hamas acceptance of the need, even progressively, to disarm, to give up its ambitions, which go far beyond Gaza or Ramallah, and extend to their desire ideologically to supplant all secular governments in the Middle East, I don't think that they're likely to accept. But what this plan does, what this announcement does, is it shifts the onus squarely onto Hamas and, frankly, onto all those in a position to apply pressure to Hamas.
There's a new dimension to this deal, and one of the points that struck me was there's this offer of amnesty to Hamas. Anyone in Hamas who hands over their weapons and commits to coexistence is eligible for that amnesty. I mean, does that sound to you like an attractive carrot for them?
Again, in the scale of things, I think it's important to state in any plan that there is a way out, a safe way out for those who give up the gun. But again, I don't see the Hamas leadership as willing or believing it necessary to give up their arms, to give up their chance, not just to governance of Gaza, but also at their broader regional objectives. I'm afraid all of those provisions, while necessary, are not sufficient to lead Hamas to the conclusion that they must accept this.
There are people in the Israeli government who might not accept this deal either, one of them being the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who called this plan, quote, a resounding diplomatic failure. How difficult do you think it's going to be for Prime Minister Netanyahu to sell this 20-point plan back home?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's requirement to sell the plan is very much dependent, again, on what the Hamas response is. If Hamas is the party that now rejects this or comes back with counter proposals that throw the entire negotiation back to where it has been stalled for the past year, then Prime Minister Netanyahu won't have to deal with his cabinet. If Hamas, though, were to genuinely, wholly accept these provisions, then indeed the Prime Minister is confronted with the need to carry through on the commitments he made at the White House yesterday. And in that regard, it's very important that Donald Trump, President Trump, is at the head personally of this putative structure, which means that any defiance of, rejection of this plan strikes directly at him. And I think that's a powerful force. Is it sufficient to move Hamas? There I have significant reservations, but it is worth absolutely the try.
I mean, a lot of people have been involved in building this deal or framework, the 20-point plan that's been under discussion. Obviously, the Trump envoy, Steve Witkoff, someone I'm sure you've worked with yourself, and of course, President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, very much involved. I mean, it does look like it's a very sort of short to medium term plan, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to have a huge amount of detail or focus on what happens in the longer term.
Well, actually, the plan does contemplate, with details to be filled in over time, a true day after. Those are the provisions that call for a reformed Palestinian Authority, which then would have a role in the governance, the administration of Gaza, and it calls, most importantly, for a recognition of the aspiration of the Palestinian people for a state.
Okay, so it sounds one of the things we learned from the last couple of days is that the idea of Israel annexing the West Bank is sort of no longer on the table. And it also looks pretty clear that Gaza becoming the Riviera of the Middle East is also off the table. I mean, that's pretty revealing, isn't it?
The law of gravity has a way, the law of reality has a way of intruding itself.
Okay, fair enough. Obviously, this is President Trump's plan and vision for ending the war. But having worked under both President Trump and President Biden, I'm told, do correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, is there anything that sets this apart from a document or a framework that President Biden would have spelt out?
It does, Tom. And the difference here is the extraordinary position, influence, agency that Donald Trump enjoys right now. No U.S. president, arguably since Dwight Eisenhower, in a very different world, has had the standing, the stature, the commanding position with respect to policy decisions that Donald Trump now has. That does not mean that Israel does not remain an absolutely sovereign state, capable, willing to take its own decisions. Of course it is. But it has to reflect very seriously on any fundamental conflict with contradiction of Donald Trump. And that is very different.
But do you think it's important that Palestinian statehood is made a little bit more, you know, the chances of it made a little bit more explicitly clear, especially to get the buy-in from world leaders and leaders in the region of the world that I'm speaking to you from, namely the Middle East? I mean, do you think that's something that they perhaps wanted to hear more about?
Tom, I think that you are quite correct. The regional parties, and let's be specific here, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all want to participate in both stabilization, interim governance of, and ultimately reconstruction of Gaza for their own reasons, security and stability for themselves, for the region as a whole. They want that. They want to do it. But the door through which that critical participation can come, and the only door, is one in which there is a commitment or recognition by the government of Israel on the need for ultimately a direct negotiation with Palestinians on a permanent resolution of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, and a recognition that there needs to be a role, I underscore, a role for a reformed Palestinian Authority. It's absolutely essential.
Does it look to you, just, I mean, when you see the amount of activity there's been diplomatically these last couple of weeks, I mean, pretty unprecedented, with some countries taking matters into their own hands, recognizing a Palestinian state unilaterally, and of course, all these discussions on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly and that summit between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Does it look like we've got a similar or comparable amount of momentum towards finding a solution to this long-standing dispute and war, something comparable to what we saw in the 90s under President Clinton, perhaps the Oslo Accords of 1993? I mean, are we there?
No, Tom, I don't think we're there. We're at the very start of an extremely steep slope. What happened in the early 90s, the Oslo process, the September 13th, 1993 handshake on the South Lawn of the White House, those were events that represented or were reflections of a ripeness in terms of the global climate, the regional climate, the mood and the political direction in Israel, and conclusions drawn by Yasser Arafat over what he needed to do to survive and advance the Palestinian cause. I would argue, I think most would, those conditions of ripeness do not exist today, but there must be a day after this kinetic ongoing campaign, almost 2 years old in Gaza, has to be. And I think this 20-point or 21-point outline, with all of the details that remain to be filled in, hits the critical points. What is essential, I repeat the bottom line here, is whether or not Hamas is willing to accept any plan that does not require it to remain armed. And I find that very difficult to conceive.
Okay, we'll have to wait and see. Just very briefly, I wanted to ask you something I'm going to be asking a couple of my other guests today, which is, what I was just speaking about there, and you didn't pick up on it, the recognition of a Palestinian state by countries like France and the UK. Do you think they helped this process by adding some momentum, or do you think they hindered it by creating an unnecessary and unwelcome distraction?
It's the latter. In no fashion did these unilateral recognitions, which were driven, let's be honest, by the domestic politics in the countries concerned, do not advance the Palestinian national aspiration 1 inch, 1 whit. Indeed, they hinder the process because I believe they encourage Hamas to believe the international tide is turning ever more in their favor. That is the last thing at this moment which any of us who have been involved, the Arab states, the critical other parties in this, in devising this plan, it's the last thing we need.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time, but really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Ambassador David Satterfield, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.